You know what you're listening to?
Is that a trick question?
It's the I Still Love This Game podcast with your host, Matthew Damian.
He's an idiot. Don't listen to this. He's an idiot.
Game 5 is in the books. And first of all, good evening. It's still evening here, barely. I was going to do the Game 5 recap, commentary, whatever you want to call it. I was going to do that after. I was going to do it in the morning. I was going to get a little bit of sleep and then do it in the morning. But after the way that game just ended, oh my God, I figured it'd be best to forego sleep and record an episode while I'm still laughing, because that was such a horrific last possession to try to seal a championship. You think about all the pain this Toronto Raptors franchise has inflicted on their fan base. That's what you come up with. Oh my God. I don't even know what to describe there, and I'm pretty sure they had timeouts. Don't quote me on that. But if they had timeouts, that makes it even more egregious. You know, J.R. Smith somewhere is smiling because we have a new contender for what not to do in closing situations of an NBA Finals game. But look, what an interesting game. And I texted a few people prior to the game when it was announced that Kevin Durant was going to play. And what an interesting storyline we had coming into it. We had, obviously, the Raptors winning back-to-back games in Oracle. They hadn't seen Kevin Durant in this series yet. They had been, for lack of a better term, fortunate. You look at the Looney injury, obviously the Klay Thompson injury, the lack of depth for Golden State, and things sort of fell into their lap. And then all of a sudden, Looney's back. Obviously, Klay Thompson is back. And now Kevin Durant is back. And you've, at least on paper, you're dealing with a full-strength Warriors team. And the onus is on the Warriors to win 3 straight. And all of a sudden, everyone's kind of like looking over their shoulder a little bit here. And they're like, well, a little bit nervous for Toronto. You know, it's a nerve-wracking situation. And, you know, Kevin Durant came out as good as advertised. I had questions about that. I had questions as to how serious the injury was. I thought it was a lot more serious than what it appeared to be, you know, a strained calf, but yet he's missed a month of basketball. And that being said, missing a month of basketball, even if he was fully healthy, you've got to question what kind of rust will he have? Will he be able to step on the court and be able to play? And there were still signs of rust, you know, airballing a jumper and things like that. But he was highly effective. If nothing else, just playing a role, just being on the court, just put a jersey on the guy, and he was highly effective in due to spacing. He was able to create space for Curry and Thompson. But he was effective much more than just spacing. He was an effective scorer out there. What did he have? He had 11 points in 10 minutes, something like that. I'm pretty sure his plus minus was through the roof because they were playing very well with him on the court. And then, I don't know, it looked like it was almost reminiscent of when Kobe tore his Achilles. He knew exactly what happened, and he was holding onto his foot. Remember, ironically, it was up against Golden State before they were championship contenders, but he was holding onto his Achilles. And then, of course, he walked up to the foul line and made both foul shots with a torn Achilles. But that's what Durant looked like when he was holding onto his foot. One thing, I hope that they don't make too big of an issue of the fans cheering when he was on the floor. I'm not sure, because the reason I say that is you can never assume what the fans were cheering over. They may have been cheering because it was a turnover. So if they were cheering because Durant was injured, then yeah, that's abhorrent behavior and they deserve to be blasted for that. But that would be an assumption that that's exactly what they were doing. I would be prepared to give the Raptors, as annoying as they are, I would be prepared to give the Raptors fan base a benefit of the doubt call here. They're not like the Philadelphia Eagles fans. They're not like the Knicks fans. They're not a nasty fan base. They are annoying. They are obnoxious. I'll give you that. But they are not a nasty one. So I hope that, you know, we exercise some judgment here and apply some context. And that context is they don't have a track record of being like that. If they do something like that again, though, they won't get the benefit of the doubt. But moving on, obviously, the Durant injury happened, and then DeMarcus Cousins came onto the court, and that was his first action. They subbed out Durant with DeMarcus Cousins. He was highly effective once again. He showed no signs of, excuse me while I yawn. I don't mean to be yawning into the microphone, but that's another example. People say, do you really not edit your podcast? Well, not usually, but that's another example of it, right? But DeMarcus Cousins did play very well offensively. And I tell you what, the three-point shooting for Golden State in this game was unbelievable. I pulled up the stats here, and just for a little bit of a correction here, it was 11 points for Kevin Durant in 12 minutes. But the three-point shooting for Golden State, they made 23 pointers. So not 23, but 20 three-point shots. So that accounts for over half of their points just in that alone. I'm not even talking about foul shots here. So 60 of their 106 points came from behind the arc. That's insane. And of course they got off to an incredible start with that too. But I'm looking at the numbers again. Like Steph Curry made a huge three to tie the game. And that was after a very poor performance down the stretch. I mean, Kawhi Leonard, he played terrible. He was kind of inverted Steph Curry here. Steph Curry played great for the first three quarters. Kawhi Leonard played terrible the first three quarters. And then Kawhi Leonard played very well for most of the fourth quarter. Steph Curry played terrible for most of the fourth quarter. Then down the last minute and a half, Kawhi Leonard was nowhere to be seen, whereas Steph Curry really stepped up. And we ended up getting 57 points, nearly 60 points out of the Splash Brothers. And that was... This was a gutsy win. I thought Game 2 was a gutsy win. This was even more gutsy. When you think about the emotional roller coaster of the whole Durant situation, and it looked like the game was getting away from him, especially in the fourth quarter. Kawhi Leonard had that brief period where he looked like he was going to take this thing over and win the championship. And I remember texting a good friend of mine. He's been on the podcast. I know he's probably listening. I want you back on the show, JC. I'm not hearing any more excuses. But I texted him and I said, look, and this is after I think it was Lowry going in for the layup, which was blocked, but it was deemed a goaltend. I remember texting him and I said, hey, this is setting up for a situation that it's going to be Kawhi Leonard going for the championship. And I didn't think they'd call an offensive foul on a moving screen, which they should have. Like, it was a moving screen, right? But the problem I have with that call is you don't wait until the fourth quarter of the Game 5 of the NBA Finals before you start making that call. Like, at some point, you need to be consistent with this. Call it all the time. It's a foul all the time, so call it all the time. Don't wait until that situation before you finally blow the whistle. Regardless, 14, 15 seconds left, ball's in the hands of Kawhi Leonard. You would think, he's the one that really got them here. You would think he would take the shot. And yeah, he was double teamed and there was another man lurking as well. That's where you call that timeout. That's exactly when you need to call that timeout, because the Raptors did not know what they were doing with it. And it ended up in Van Fleet's hands. He didn't want it, which is surprising because ever since the midway point of the conference finals, he's looked completely fleetless, completely fearless. And this is a moment where he did look like a deer in headlights, and Lowry was put in a really tough situation. And here's the scary thing: if you're Toronto, you got a really, really good game out of Kyle Lowry, and yet you still couldn't come away with the victory. Kawhi Leonard didn't play well. I mean, the flip side to this as well is how badly Kawhi Leonard played, how badly Marc Gasol played. 17 points, but only 6 shot attempts. He's got to be more aggressive with that. Siakam played horrifically. He had 15 shot attempts. Leonard, as I said before, 9 of 24 with 5 turnovers, not very good. Danny Green, once again, non-existent. Ibaka, look, Ibaka is very effective, but he's very, very out of control. He'll give up a lot of bad fouls. The turnovers that he has. He had 2 turnovers in the ball game. I'm not sure if that's a good thing, his energy, or not. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, and it was kind of accounted how good he was with his energy. And what I was trying to get to, the point I was trying to get to, and I'll get to it, is the Raptors really let this one go. They were up by, 5 points with 90 seconds to go, 2 minutes to go. You're at home. Kevin Durant's not playing. Steph Curry's playing horribly at that point in the fourth quarter. And they really let that slip. And nightmarish situation for the Raptors, because this is deja vu. This is beyond cruel. If they don't win this championship, this is beyond cruel. You could not write this for a franchise. If they somehow let that one out of their grasp, this is, right up there with the Cleveland Indians in terms of a tormented franchise in getting so close and looking like they're finally over the line, and then, no, we've changed our minds. We're not going to deliver it for you. But an interesting thing about this series, and leading into this series, I brought up the 93 series as a comparison, and the reason I brought that up was obviously Barkley going to Phoenix and finally getting Phoenix to the NBA Finals. Similarly to how Kawhi Leonard was traded to the Raptors, traded to a different conference, and he was able to get them finally to the NBA Finals. Excuse me, sorry. That's like, I'm gonna give myself a timeout every time I yawn. But the Kawhi Leonard finally got the Raptors to the franchise after being traded to the finals. Excuse me. And when you think back to the NBA Finals in 1993, only one game, and that was Game 4, and it took Jordan scoring 55 points in that game. By the way, only one game was won by the home team. Now, we're only 5 games in. The 93 series went 6 games. We're only 5 games in, but only one home game has been won. One game has been won by the home team. And that, of course, was Game 1. The last 4 games have been won by the road team. Isn't that insane? That's incredible. I can't remember the last time we have seen 4 straight games won by the road team. Obviously, I referenced just then the 93. I'm talking about the finals, by the way. We've seen this in the first round. I think what was it? The 2005 series, I think it was, between the Mavericks and the Rockets. I think that happened, as well as the 95 series between the Western Conference Finals between the Rockets and the Spurs. That happened, but I can't think of the last time it's happened in the NBA Finals, if it's ever happened. But the 93 series was probably the closest, where there was the first 3 games, and then of course Game 4 was won by the Bulls, who were at home, and then Game 5 by Phoenix, Game 6 by the Bulls to win the championship. That was when it was the 2-3-2 format. So it's an interesting situation, because now everyone's going to instantly assume that the Warriors have an excellent chance to push this to 7. But do they really? Because they haven't been very well. They haven't played very well in Oracle, especially in this series. So maybe what's even more concerning is their lack of depth, and who are they going to go to? Especially, it's not just Durant that's hurt. Looney missed the last, 5-6 minutes of that game, and he looked like he was in all sorts of pain. Talk about a gutsy performance by that entire team, from top to bottom, from your superstar player to Looney, who's not a great player, obviously, but a very important player, but he still gutted it out as far as he could possibly take him. I'm not sure what they're going to do. Personally, I would start DeMarcus Cousins, and I would keep that quote-unquote lineup of depth, with Iguodala, Draymond Green. Obviously, you can't go with Kevin Durant. You probably go with Livingston, maybe, or maybe even Cook, or Bell. They were aggressive as well. And then, of course, you have Curry and Thompson. But obviously, the lineup of depth is really just small ball. But you can't play that the entire game. It's going to be an interesting situation. It's going to be a really interesting situation to see what happens in Oracle. But what I'm really going to be paying attention to is how Toronto, how they respond to the challenge again. They basically had a championship in their hands. You would have thought, for all intents and purposes, this game was essentially wrapped up. As I said, they're up by 5 points. Kawhi Leonard had finally got it going. Steph Curry had not got it going at that point. They should have had this championship won. And it was kind of a shocking way that last possession happened. Are they going to be able to recover? Or are the doubts going to start creeping in? How is Kyle Lowry going to respond to that? How is Ibaka going to respond to that? It's going to be interesting. It's going to be really interesting. And this series, this has not been the greatest final series in terms of execution, but storylines and intrigue, it's been pretty good. Obviously leading into game one, Golden State they were the heavy favorites, and we were kind of wanting to see exactly how Toronto would handle the pressure. They handled it very well. And then we were kind of looking around like, hey, maybe Golden State's in a lot of trouble here, especially game 2, Durant's still not playing. And then Golden State was the one that recovered, and like, yeah, okay, Golden State's back on track. And then games 3 and 4, obviously Klay Thompson was out for game 3, but you kind of had the feeling like, okay, it might be a longer series, but even if he misses game 3, they're in control of the series. They've got home court. All they got to do is split games 3 and game 4. Obviously, they lost game 3. That wasn't very competitive because you really only had Steph Curry, although he had a great game that game. He was never really in control of that game. And then game 4, it was really eye-opening as to how well Toronto played in the third quarter, especially. So you compound, that's a roller coaster we had coming into this game, and then you had all the fireworks and theatrics that happened, the storylines that developed within this game alone. And game 6 should be very interesting. I don't even know when it's scheduled for. I think it's scheduled for Thursday. I think they get 3 days rest between games if they have to travel in the NBA Finals, which is, it's annoying because it's so long, but I guess it builds a little bit too. But if you want my predictions as to what happens in game 6, I'm going to say Golden State wins game 6. Obviously, Durant's not going to play. But I think, as Rudy T said, never underestimate the heart of a champion. And we've seen it twice now on the road in this series that Golden State has responded to the challenge very, very, very well. And I think they still feel, and rightly so, that their backs are up against the wall here. So let's see how Toronto deals with this disappointment, because I'm concerned for them. I'm really concerned for them. And if Golden State can pull this off, that's pretty gutsy. That's pretty gutsy, and we'll reevaluate everything at that point in terms of all the things that I've said about them. But in terms of reevaluating, I am reevaluating going to bed. So I got 20 minutes out talking about the game. I didn't take any notes because I was going to do this in the morning. I did look at the box score whilst I was reading out talking about some of the performances of the players. I hope you enjoyed Game 5, and Game 6 should be interesting. It's going to be worth the watch. So send through some questions. If I get enough good questions and I've got enough free time, I'll do an episode previewing it. But guys, thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed Game 5. I hope you also enjoyed Game 6. Hope you enjoyed the show. I will catch up with you shortly.